Yes, sir.
Thank you. Bishop Curry, we are at the appointed time and we have a quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, and we'll begin with opening prayer led by our chaplain. Kurt?
Let us pray. Gracious God, we thank you for the opportunity to gather together and for Zoom that makes it possible on such short notice. We all have been anxiously and with excitement waiting for General Convention for a long time. And we are attempting to discern the best, safest way forward. As we deliberate today and look towards July, give us the opportunity not only to hear one another, but to hear you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Kurt. And let me first welcome everyone who is here for this special meeting, and thank those who called it. And especially I want to welcome members of council, but also I want to welcome members of the public, both concerned church folk and general public who are concerned and would like to hear and learn more about our conversations. Also want to welcome members of the media, both church and secular, who are with us on this as well. And there may be members of the Joint Standing Committee on Planning and Arrangements who were invited to join us if they were able. To all who are with us this day, welcome. We are now called to order formally, and we begin with an explanation on our meeting today. Julia?
Thank you, Presiding Bishop. Colleagues, we are meeting today at the request of Russ Randall, Rose Sconyers, Jane Sislucis, Mally Lloyd, Dabney Smith, and myself in accordance with Title I, Canon 4, Section 5A of the Canons. We called this meeting for multiple reasons. The first is because we want to hold ourselves accountable to the request made by Russ Randall in our plenary session on Friday, April 22nd, while we were in San Juan, Puerto Rico, during the time of Patty Downing's point of personal privilege. At that time, Russ asked for, and we agreed as a body, to meet virtually, as well as a whole council, roughly 2 weeks after our in-person meeting. 2 weeks after Russ's request was May 6th. So we are still somewhat close, albeit a bit delayed in that initial timeframe. The second rationale for meeting today is to better understand the mechanisms for decision-making surrounding General Convention. Our third is to hear from our presiding officers, the presiding bishop and the president of the House of Deputies, as they are the leaders and ultimate decision makers regarding the nature of our upcoming General Convention in light of recent events. And finally, we are here so that we may discern together how Executive Council can best support this work. Thank you all for taking the time, especially on such short notice, to be with us today. We are especially grateful to our presiding officers and Secretary Barlow, who are able to coordinate their busy schedules to make this meeting happen. Thank you, Presiding Bishop. I hand this meeting back to you.
Julia, thank you, and thank you again to all of those who have called us together today. The next item on the agenda will be from the two chancellors on the role and responsibilities of the presiding officers, the Joint Standing Committee on Planning and Arrangements, and the Executive Council. Sally and Mary, we are yours.
Good morning, everyone. I'm going to give a very quick and hopefully simple overview of the decision-making process, primarily regarding the dates for General Convention, which would include not holding it in 2022, and the length of general convention. And some of you may recall some of this from when the decision was made, oh my goodness, it feels like a long time ago now, to not hold the 80th General Convention as originally scheduled in July of 2021. And the process that was used to postpone it, at that point, a date wasn't set, but it was eventually set for July of this year, 2022. And under our governing documents, primarily the Constitution and canons, but with some involvement of the joint rules of order, it provides that if there's a concern about the date or the length, the presiding officers receive a recommendation from the Joint Standing Committee on Planning and Arrangements, which you'll find the membership of in that joint rule. And Planning and Arrangements discusses whatever the concerns are. They make a recommendation regarding the date or the length previously set, and we have a canonical process for setting the date of convention, the site of convention, and the length of convention that's always followed. Planning and Arrangements would consider it, make a recommendation to the President of the House of Deputies and the presiding bishop. And I'll stop there for a moment. So that happens. That's step two. Somebody first goes to Planning and Arrangements with a concern, or Planning and Arrangements surfaces a concern of their own. The president and the presiding bishop receive Planning and Arrangements recommendation, and then they have a choice. They have a decision to make. They may do something with the recommendation of Planning and Arrangements, or they may choose not to do anything with the recommendation of Planning and Arrangements. So that's the next decision point. If they decide not to do anything, then things stay as they are at the originally scheduled site, date, and length. If they choose to seek a change in the date or the length, if they agree to do so, the two of them together, they then bring a recommended change to you, the Executive Council, and ask you to give them your advice and to consent to whatever change in the date or the length the presiding officers ask for. Then Executive Council gives their advice to the two presiding officers and either consents to a change in the date or the length or both, or chooses not to consent to the change. If you don't consent when there's such a request, then things stay as originally scheduled. If you do consent, then the changes that you consent to are made. That's an overview of the canonical process as to whether or not or how to change either the date or the length. And let me say something about the date, which when people talk about that perhaps it shouldn't be held at all, meaning what that really translates into is not canceling, because we don't ever cancel a regular meeting of the General Convention. We just change when it will occur. And were the decision to be to not hold the 80th General Convention in 2022, then a new date would be set. So the actual issue of canceling is really never on the table. We change the date. That's my explanation. Mary, anything you would like to add?
Oh, very well done. And just piping in to let everyone know that that Sally and I are in agreement in this reading of the canons.
Let me invite any members of council, if you have questions of Sally or Mary about what's just been shared in terms of decision-making and process. And the secretary will identify if there are any hands raised.
Yes, and reminder, thank you, Presiding Bishop, and a reminder to council that throughout this meeting, we will not be able to see you probably unless you use the raise hand function of Zoom. Bishop Curry, I see no hands raised.
Thank you, Sally. Thank you, Mary. Mr. Secretary, would you go ahead and you had technical announcements and I just skipped over that. I'm sorry.
It's quite all right. I've made two of the announcements already to those joining, but if you've not done so already, please do select which language you would like to hear this meeting. Those of you on Zoom, we will be using the interpretation module, and this meeting is being simultaneously interpreted into Spanish. The attendee list for today's session will act as the roll call for those who are members of Executive Council. And a reminder, we have a number of people, we invited a number of additional people to join us in the Zoom session, but a reminder that only those members who have voice and vote or voice and seat are allowed to participate in this conversation unless the chair recognizes them. Bishop Curry, that concludes my announcements.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. And I believe I see, is that Aaron Perkins? Have you got your hand up, Aaron?
Yes, he's just raised his hand.
My apologies, false alarm.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you, Aaron. Allow me to share some perspective as both chair of council and presiding bishop, and read to you a statement that summarizes where I am, where we are, and then President Jennings will share as well. President Jennings and I, in our capacity as the presiding officers of the two houses of the General Convention, have been meeting together and in consultation with Canon Barlow in his capacity as the executive officer of the General Convention. Allow me to share the fruit of this work in these conversations. First, we are not calling for the postponement of the 80th General Convention. Let me say that again. We are not calling for the postponement of the 80th General Convention. There are essential matters for the governance and good order of the church which must be transacted. We are committed to holding the 80th General Convention in Baltimore this summer. I was blessed to serve as a priest in that remarkable city and diocese. I know how much this commitment to the city of Baltimore and to the Diocese of Maryland matters. But obviously, with the ongoing variations of the COVID pandemic, we are likewise committed to gathering in the safest and healthiest way possible. Love of neighbor is not simply a good idea. It is a commandment of Jesus, based on the teaching of Moses, to always seek the good and the well-being of each other. So while we are committed to the 80th General Convention meeting in Baltimore this summer, that does not mean business as usual. We have consulted with medical, epidemiological, and public health experts. We have listened to suggestions and ideas from around the church. We will be listening closely to our conversation today as Executive Council. There will be further conversations later today at the Standing Committee on Planning and Arrangements. Additionally, I have consulted with the Presiding Bishop's Council of Advice as part of this. This is all part of the collaborative and consultative way that we make decisions as a church in which lay people, clergy, and bishops work together to discern how we trust the Holy Spirit may be leading us. It is clear to us that the safest and healthiest way to meet is for the General Convention to do so first, observing rigorous protocols and procedures for health, safety, and pastoral care. And secondly, for the convention to be both shorter in duration and smaller in size. Let me read that again. It is clear to us that the safest and healthiest way to meet is for a General Convention to do so first, observing rigorous protocols and procedures for health, safety, and pastoral care. And secondly, for the convention to be both shorter in duration and smaller in size, focusing on health and safety and on our work on matters essential for the governance and good order of the church will provide guiding rubrics for both discerning the size and duration. We will be sharing this with planning and arrangements, with a process for working out the specifics of how this can best be done. President Jennings will share that in the results of the survey conducted of the House of Deputies in a few moments. But let me summarize. We are going to Baltimore for the 80th General Convention this summer. We do so to attend only to matters essential for the governance and good order of the church. We must do so following the most rigorous protocols for public health and safety as recommended by medical and public health experts. This will mean a convention that is shorter in duration and smaller in size. President Jennings will share a mechanism and process for working out the details of this, as well as the survey that was recently conducted. President Jennings.
Thank you, Presiding Bishop, and good morning. It's good to see all of you again. Thank you for making time to be here, and special thanks to the members of Executive Council who took the initiative to call this important meeting. Like Bishop Curry, I have a statement as well, so I'll be reading some of it. As the Presiding Bishop has said, we are committed to holding the 80th General Convention this summer, and we are committed to doing it in as safe a way as possible. This will be a convention for essential governance functions. As hard as it is to accept, we are not yet able to hold the big family reunion we've all been longing for. But what we believe we can do with appropriate COVID protocols in place is have a short, focused meeting to hold elections, approve a budget, and address other critical issues and essential legislation that cannot wait until 2024. In order to design such a convention quickly and efficiently, the Presiding Bishop and I will later this morning be telling the Joint Standing Committee on Planning and Arrangements that we have asked the parliamentarians of each House of General Convention, Brian Crislock in the House of Deputies and Sean Rowe in the House of Bishops, to convene a small working group of leaders of both houses who will recommend to us the best way to hold a shorter, smaller convention at which we can do the work of governing the church. We are asking this group to work quickly, providing us with a plan that we can ask planning and arrangements to recommend. We will then return to you to seek your advice and counsel before making final decisions. This process conforms to the requirements of our canons, but it does mean that some questions will not be answered right away. This will require many of us to keep our travel plans flexible for now and to be prepared to adjust to changing public health conditions. Excuse me. None of this is ideal, but we believe it is the best way to respond to the rising COVID case numbers across much of the country and the reality that this wave of COVID may well peak just as we are gathering in Baltimore. As deputies know, I have for some time been uncertain about how we should proceed with General Convention. I believe with all my heart that we must gather this summer to hold elections for new leaders, especially a new president of the House of Deputies, and to address some of the key issues raised during this triennium by interim bodies and Executive Council. And yet, it is deeply sobering to contemplate holding an event at which we know some people, perhaps many people, will become sick. The real life consequences of this decision became, unfortunately, even clearer to me when I contracted COVID at the April meeting of Executive Council. I'm finally feeling better, although you can hear I've got a residual cough. But it's been a long 15 days of illness, and it has sharpened my understanding of what COVID can do, even to someone who is vaccinated and boosted. I'm grateful to the many, many deputies and alternate deputies who have shared with me their thinking about General Convention and COVID, and especially to the more than 600 deputies and 200 alternate deputies who filled out a survey I sent them last Friday evening. That's an amazing response rate. It has been their counsel that has helped me to see a path forward to a shorter, smaller convention. While fewer than half of deputies want to go forward with General Convention as planned, more than 70% are willing to go forward in person in some way. Only 15% of deputies want to postpone convention. A commanding number of deputies want to see us add daily rapid testing, a ban on eating on the floor of the House, and social distance protocols to our existing mask and vaccine requirements. And many deputies have volunteered to help make this pandemic convention successful, from doctors and nurses who will help advise deputies who become ill, to pastoral care volunteers, to those who will contribute to a mutual aid effort. I'm still very cautious about gathering in person in Baltimore, but I believe that if we all commit to abiding by the guidelines and caring for one another and for the most vulnerable among us, we can do our essential governance work as efficiently and as safely as possible. I'm extremely grateful to Brian Crislock and Sean Rowe for leading the effort to design a shorter, smaller convention. And I pledge to all of you that the work from here on out will move as quickly and as efficiently as it can, so that the many questions you have now can be answered as soon as possible. And if I might, Presiding Bishop, I think this is the point in the agenda where we could hear from Dr. Coldren. And with your permission, I'd like to introduce him.
Certainly, please proceed.
Thank you. As all of you in Executive Council know, you generously authorized funds so that I could contract with a public health expert. And I have done so. I did so quite quickly. It was very fortunate to learn of Dr. Rodney Coldren. I've met with him twice, and I've sent you the meeting notes, or I've attached them on the extranet, of my 2 conversations with him. He's a board certified preventive medicine physician who's also residency trained in family medicine and certified as a medical review officer. It's in the notes that I sent to you, but he's an epidemiologist, a clinician, a researcher, an academic, and a public health emergency officer. And he has, in addition to his medical degree, he has his master's in public health from Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, just down the road from the convention center. He recently retired from the United States Army as a colonel, and he was, I think, significantly the leader of the U.S. Army Europe Africa's public health response to COVID-19 outbreak. So I'm very pleased that you authorized this, and I'm very pleased to welcome Dr. Coldren. And if we could hear from him, his reflections on what he's heard, and then give all of you an opportunity to ask questions. Dr. Coldren.
President Jennings, thank you, Presiding Bishop. First, I want to thank you all for giving me the opportunity to be part of this. It's actually really exciting. And it's particularly gratifying to work with a group of people who seem so committed to not only carrying out the important work you do, but carrying it out safely and protecting the vulnerable. It really is very refreshing. So I'm not, I really can't say enough about that. Presiding Bishop Curry and President Jennings have actually already laid out all of my recommendations. You do have to be aware that if you meet in person, there will be cases. It is simply essentially inevitable, but certainly understand that you do need to meet to carry out the business of the church. I certainly do encourage, though, as was stated, that the meeting be held with the least number of people possible and for the shortest period of time that you're able to carry out your business. There's a number of reasons for these, but reducing both the number of people there and the time exponentially decreases the number of cases we would expect to see as a direct result of this meeting in person. Again, attention to sanitary measures, maintaining distance, masking, and avoiding activities that really increase the potential spread of COVID. Unfortunately, to include singing. I'm a former choir boy. I love singing, but it, in my experience, was responsible for more outbreaks of COVID in Germany than almost any other activity. So that's where I come from with that recommendation. The daily testing, I think, is also important. It can help identify cases that have not yet become symptomatic, or cases that would never become symptomatic. One thing we know about Omicron is that in fully vaccinated people, or even fully vaccinated people, are as likely to get Omicron and therefore are able to spread it once infected. However, greatly reduced chance of becoming seriously ill. And I really applaud you all for your vaccine mandate as well. It speaks to the seriousness with which you all take these measures. So that's really all I have to say up front, and I'm certainly happy and willing to answer any questions you have.
Okay, the secretary will identify raised hands, and then we'll call on you.
Bishop Curry, Ed Konieczny has his hand raised.
Ed?
Thank you. Doctor, thank you very much for the work that you're doing for us and the advice that you're providing. We appreciate it greatly. I would like to ask just a couple of questions of clarification that you might be able to help us with. And maybe, Gay, you can help me clarify the first piece of information. It was my understanding that the majority of folks in Puerto Rico who, after returning home, tested negative were from one particular committee. Am I correct in that understanding? And where I'm going with that is my understanding also was that that particular committee chose not to wear masks during their meetings. And then my question for the doctor would be, could that have mitigated the infection rate of the folks returning back home had they followed the protocol that we had established prior? And then I'll ask my second question, and I'll stop and the doctor can answer them all at once. Would it be feasible or would it be recommended that anyone attending General Convention have a PCR 3 days prior to arrival instead of showing up and then doing a daily rapid test? And my reasoning for asking that question is, in Puerto Rico, can we assume that the virus was brought to the meeting, or was the infection as a result of being in that particular location? And those are my questions. Thank you.
Could I just respond to Ed? I believe that there were 3 from one committee, but there were 2 from another committee and 2 from another committee. So I don't know that you can say it was only in one committee.
Okay, great. Thank you. That was the clarification I was seeking. Thank you very much.
Doctor?
So first, to answer the question about masking, clearly masks are effective. They're not 100%. Nothing is 100%. But you know, when I would answer these questions previously, I'd always point out that 50% is better than 0%. And masks, I believe, are even better than 50%, particularly high quality ones. In the early stages of COVID, we would see, highly infectious individuals not infecting anybody in their offices because everybody was wearing masks. So I truly am a believer in masking. As far as where the infection came from in Puerto Rico, with Omicron, it has such a rapid incubation period. So from the time you become infected to the time you can infect others, it is so short that trying to figure out the index case or where the cases came from is essentially impossible. It could have been from staff at the hotel. It could have been brought in. It could have been from a random encounter at a restaurant. There's just, you can't do it. You could do it back with the old Wuhan strain, but we don't even try with Omicron essentially. And as far as a PCR 3 days prior versus daily testing, again, with Omicron, doing a PCR 3 days prior is going to miss a significant number of cases. Again, you have about 2 days from the time you're infected till you become infectious with Omicron. So 3 days out misses anybody who was recently infected. It is true that the rapid tests are not as sensitive as the PCR, and so they will miss cases that PCR would pick up. But they tend to be better at identifying infectious individuals. And those are the ones we're really worried about. We're not necessarily worried about identifying a case early so much as trying to prevent onward spread, at least in the public health as opposed to the clinical world. And so a daily testing regimen will still miss some people, but fewer than doing a single test days out. We did discuss, and I would advise having people do a rapid test prior to getting on a plane. And that's not only to protect your meeting, but to protect all the other passengers on the plane. We know planes to be a fairly robust source of new infections. Does that answer the questions?
Presiding Bishop, I think Ed
Yes.
has the follow-up.
Oh,
Yeah, thank
Ed?
you, Doctor. That does. And my suggestion about the 3 days was not so much about the timing of it, other than it takes 3 days to get a result for a PCR when you go to get it. So that was my 3-day thought. But thank you for your explanation. I appreciate it very much.
okay.
Bishop Curry, Russ Randall.
Russ?
Yes, thank you, Presiding Bishop. Doctor, thank you very much for your advice here. Let me ask a question that may give us a real world comparison. I looked at the Orioles' home schedule. They play essentially a block from the convention center. They have 7 home games during the time currently scheduled for convention. How, if you can, is it possible to compare the risk of somebody attending using our protocols at convention with somebody who has a season ticket attending those 7 games?
I obviously cannot give an exact comparison, but attending 7 games, first of all, would depend if they're in a box or in an open seat. Open seat greatly reduces the risk. The duration that these individuals are together is relatively short, depending how many innings you go into and the like. But I would say that is the risk that you all face of putting a group of people together in a closed space for hours at a time makes this a higher risk event than the attending the season ticket, the season sitting outside. Sitting inside a booth, it may be comparable. We do know, though, that COVID does not transmit well in the outdoor environment, and that's why I would encourage you guys also to do as much of your meeting or gathering outside as possible. It greatly mitigates the risk.
Thank you very much.
Bishop Curry, I understand that Charles Graves is having some technical difficulties, but has been raising his hand for a while, or trying to raise his hand for a while. Could you call on him, please?
Certainly. Charles?
Thank you. And yes, sorry, for some reason, Zoom didn't want to let me select the raise hand feature. Two questions. I suppose this is primarily for President Jennings and perhaps Secretary Barlow as well. President Jennings, you mentioned that we need to transact elections, budget, and I think your phrase was critical legislation that can't wait for 2 years. How do we determine what is critical legislation? What does that phrase mean exactly? What is critical and what is not critical? And how is that determination made? And my other question is, is it possible that any of the critical legislation could be handled virtually at all? I know we had a conversation similar to this a year and a half ago, or whenever it was that we decided to postpone General Convention. But it seems to me that some things, like perhaps the election of officers, could take place online. It doesn't have to necessarily happen in real time. I know we have issues with time zones in there. So those are two questions. What's critical legislation, and who determines that? And then what's been the conversation about whether some things can be handled virtually or not?
In terms of determining critical legislation, of course, critical is in the eye of the beholder, but this design group that we are convening will include dispatch of business, who's already thinking about how to poll the various legislative committees, asking them to prioritize what has been assigned to them. So we don't have the answers to all of that yet, but that's what this group will be working on. In terms of an election of a president in particular, there has to be, according to the canons, the term of the president concludes at the close of the next regular general convention. So convention has to be convened in order for the election to take place.
Could I jump in and just add, part of the question was about what could we do online as well. And I know that conversation is circulating around the church. And now, to be sure, our legislative committees have been meeting online, and that's doable. The question about the convention taking action online in a hybrid fashion, that gets technically complicated. And I say this as somebody who was on track and somebody who believes we need to make the changes to make more online options possible. But the technical reality is between now and basically the 4th of July, to be able to pull that off requires a lot of technical capacity. We don't have the time and the space to be able to pull that off and do it in an effective way. And so that's why we're hedging on kind of online options for even voting, which is fairly simple, but again, it gets complicated when you have a hybrid situation of some people present, some people not. And it's just going to make sense for us to be able to have ramp up time for future general conventions to be able to do that.
Presiding Bishop, may I just offer
Absolutely
about that as well before we move on? What you said is actually is quite true. We don't have very much time to do it. As members of the council will know, I have an opinion about all of these things and think we could have done it at some time earlier. But we were told, all of us were told, that it was not possible under existing canons and rules of order to be able to do it. So I just simply wanted to clarify that it is not technical reasons why this was not explored. It was because of what we were told was impossible to do under the canons and the rules of order.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Charles, excuse me, go ahead.
No, Charles?
Did we answer your questions? Yes, we did. Okay. Yes, Mr. Secretary?
Yes. Polly Getz.
Polly?
Thank you. My question is I'm sorry, it's really early in the morning here. My question revolves around some practical components. For example, and I would like to hear from the doctor on this one as well. Many deputations, in order to save money, have their deputies, to the extent possible, sharing hotel rooms. And so I'm asking, my question is, what impact does that have, Dr. Cauldron? And has that been part of our conversation in planning going forward? And a related question is, if we've got deputies who are sharing hotel rooms and one of the two in any given room is found to test positive, is there arrangement, is it possible to make arrangements for one or more essentially quarantine hotel rooms where someone who is testing positive can go to self-quarantine for X amount of time? And what is the recommended period of time now? I believe it has gotten shorter from when it used to be, I think, 2 weeks to shelter in place or whatever. So where are we on the accommodations question?
From a medical public health standpoint, obviously sharing rooms is a significant risk for a roommate. You essentially become a household contact during that period. And we know that household contacts are extremely likely to become infected. So a hotel roommate would be extremely likely to become infected. If one individual becomes symptomatic and becomes a known case, if they are vaccinated, and I understand all your deputies will be, they are required to isolate for 5 days now, according to recommended guidelines. The US CDC recommends that fully vaccinated individuals who are contacts of a case do not need to quarantine. I am not entirely convinced that is the safest way to go in the case of a roommate. I think other contacts within convention can probably safely go about their business, but the risk of a roommate becoming infected is so great. I just cannot see that it would be the best idea to have that individual continue to attend. The need to save money is important. I certainly understand that. So it's again, one of those realities that you all have to work through.
Presiding Bishop, I can answer the housing questions and also that.
Sure, please.
First of all, we will be able to provide extra hotel rooms if needed for quarantine purposes, isolation purposes, that is. On the issue of sharing rooms, we have been discouraging this, and I just texted Patrick to see whether we have any examples of where that are known to us of deputations doing this. There may well be some, but we don't have any examples of that. So I think discouraging that seems to have been taken effect across the way, which is pretty much all I can report now, but we would continue, obviously, to discourage that, and we could, and I'm sure we can, reach out where that might have been done already and to make alternative arrangements.
And you certainly would not need to create special quarantine rooms if individuals are staying alone in a room. They simply, that becomes their isolation room. And if you agree that a roommate of an infected person really should not be continuing to attend the convention in person, essentially they just stay together. Or the other person could in fact be moved to a private room to reduce the risk of their becoming infected. That would really be a personal choice.
Presiding Bishop, Holly Palstrom.
Holly?
Hi. So I have two questions. The first one is, I'd like to get a sense of the financial implications of the things such as providing daily rapid testing for all participants. And I know since we don't know how many participants are going to be taking part, we may not know that, but providing quarantine, hotel rooms, other types of things. I know we have a large surplus, and I am curious how much of that surplus would be going to that, as well as the changes in the contracts for shortening the convention. The second question is, I've seen some discussion, or we've had some discussion about this potential hybrid option, and I just want to make sure that I'm clear. So something like gaveling in to amend the rules of order and then gaveling out to conduct the rest of the business online. Am I understanding that that is not technically possible at this point, at this late stage in the game?
Why don't I take a stab at, oh, go ahead. Secretary Barlow, you want to take a stab at that last one?
Well, I wasn't going to take a stab at the last one, but the previous one, I think the answer is we certainly are going to have this certainly is going to have a huge financial impact, because we're within all the contractual periods of time already, the 60-day changes and so forth. And we've also made contractual obligations about the numbers of hotel rooms and so forth. We were very successful. In fact, we were 100% successful in renegotiating without any cost to the church the original change in dates. But because we are no longer in an environment where the government is suggesting, or the CDC is suggesting, that meetings don't take place, there's no force majeure that we could rely on in order to mitigate costs. So I don't know, and I don't think anyone at this moment would know the exact financial ramifications of that until we get into what President Jennings was talking about specific dates. I mean, one of the things, for instance, that would certainly be considered would be having the meeting, if it were to be shorter, over a period of time where we have contractually obligated ourselves to have more rooms, which would somewhat mitigate the risks, the financial losses. But for the other things, I'm not sure, including the cost of the cost that might exist for daily rapid testing and so forth. I've already told the presiding officers, and others are aware of this, that we would, if we were to choose to do the daily testing, if that is the recommendation we follow, then it would be almost impossible logistically, because it takes roughly 30 minutes from the time you come in, fill out the forms and everything else, for that to be done in a clinical environment or any other sort of remote environment. It would have to be administered, self-administered. So we'd have to work on all the details about that as well. But I have no idea at this point what those costs might be. And as to the other question you raised, Presiding Bishop, maybe that you want to call on the chancellors to address that?
On the voting, the call to order, change the rules and voting?
Yes.
The chancellors? Either Sally or Mary or both?
I think the challenge with that is it's a challenge. It's a big challenge, and it's something that needs to be looked at longer term. There would be a lot of issues to resolve. I don't think it's quite as simple as convening to suspend the rules and then continuing. It would be a complex analysis. But Mary?
I think that because the logistics make it difficult, at this point, we're not, I agree with Sally, there are complexities. I think we know from previous conversations that reasonable minds may disagree on what the canons allow, and that in itself presents challenges. And so that's what I would say. But what I'm hearing is the bottom line, as a practical matter, is that it's late for us to do that now, and so it's something that we probably should study post all of this.
Thank you. Okay. Mr. Secretary?
Patty Downing.
Patty?
Thank you. I have three questions. One, you sort of talked about whether the deputies and members who are attending would be issued tests that they would do in their rooms, or whether we would be expected to bring our own. Second, ensuring the mask policy, because when we met as an executive council, we had a mask policy that we were stringent at attending to, and then not at all. And so how do we have a common understanding of that, and what's the policing for that, quite frankly? And secondly, or thirdly, because I'm on PBNF and we rarely get to eat, I'm wondering about the time that will be allowed for a large gathering to go to lunch, to go to dinner, because usually we have to go out, get it, bring it back, that sort of thing. And so the logistics of that, I'm just wondering about.
Presiding Bishop, I can take a stab at at least one of those questions. The one
Sure.
about, and that is about the testing, whether they would be provided and so forth. And that is, we haven't explored exactly what that would mean. We would certainly be able to provide tests. It's my understanding that there's a hybrid situation right now in the United States, that this doesn't pertain to other countries of the Episcopal Church, that any individual household can get some tests, and many tests are made available for free, or if you have health insurance, they ask that there's no copay, but that you be asked to provide your health insurance, if you have health insurance, that information. But we haven't examined that in great detail yet. We certainly would. And it's my guess that we would, whatever we decide, if that were to be decided, that we would figure out the most economical way and to mitigate any potential impact on individuals. As far as another question that Patty raised about the length of time for meals and so forth, in the draft schedule, which will clearly have to be changed, we had already provided a longer lunch period. The point she raises about PBNF and other groups is absolutely correct. And I think that would be something that the group that President Jennings mentioned would certainly take a look at. And I think President Jennings is going to comment about that and maybe answer the other question.
President
I
Jennings?
think, I'm not, what was the last question? The other question that Patty, did you get all your questions answered, Patty? What was the other one?
About adhering to the mask wearing policy. We didn't do it at Executive Council. And how are we going to ensure it? If we're going to say it's our policy, how are we going to ensure it?
Dr. Calderon, would you like to opine on this?
I actually don't really have a medical opinion on this. That's is largely a logistical matter. The only thing I can recommend is that you maintain whatever policy you decide, that you be steadfast about it. As soon as you allow deviations from your plan, it just opens up the door to every aspect of COVID prevention being circumvented.
Thank you. And Patty, this design group is going to have to look at that among other issues, but certainly within the House of Deputies. I'll be talking with other leaders about how we're going to enforce that. It really is, as I've said before, it's a covenant. I also have a sergeant at arms. We have a sergeant at arms who may need some assistance to basically monitor the house, because as Dr. Calderon says, if a segment says we're not going to do it, I mean, I obviously don't want to get drastic in terms of expelling people, but if you come as a deputy, you're agreeing to the policies. So we'll be talking more about it.
Okay. All right. Mr. Secretary?
Cornelia Eaton.
Cornelia?
Yes, good morning. Cornelia Eaton from Navajo Land Area Mission. My question is, how will we accommodate deputies who choose not to attend General Convention? And I say this because folks will be traveling from many areas to Baltimore, and folks will be on the airplane for a long period of hours. And so when we do the testing, sometimes the testing doesn't come up as negative or positive. I mean, I think the doctor said that sometimes it shows and sometimes it doesn't. So, I mean, I just feel that, folks who have no symptoms will be around communities as such, and also that how will we accommodate, especially folks who are not going to attend, and knowing that some communities are very vulnerable to this virus. And I just hope that we can continue to stay mindful to those who have deep concerns for this. So. And that's what I think.
Who would like to take a stab at that? Let me just suggest that one, this meeting is being minuted, which is to say that there are notes of this meeting, so that these comments will be given to the design group, so that some things we may not be able to answer today, but these comments will go to the design group, planning and arrangements, so that attention can be paid to things that we don't have the answers for today. Somebody may be able to address a couple of your concerns, Cornelia. I don't see anybody raising their hand, though. Please know that the concerns you just identified will be given to the design group as well as planning and arrangements. And the GCO is here as well. And a number of the comments that others have made as well. Okay.
Alice Freeman.
Alice?
Thank you. Two questions, please. Many of our churches have installed filtration systems designed to target pathogens. Do we know if any of the hotels and/or the convention center have installed such systems? That's the first. The second is there any liability on our part should someone become ill of COVID and pass away?
Presiding Bishop, I can address the first one and would suggest you call on Kent Anker, our CLO, for the second. Alice has raised a very important point because as we have all read and know, the quality of air and air filtration and so forth is one of the measures that's been recommended. The convention center itself, and you can find more information about this by looking at the General Convention website, has increased considerably its own filtration system. And we have a more technical answer about all this, but I don't have it at hand right now. But it is, to my knowledge, as good as it gets right now in such circumstances. About meeting rooms and hotels and so forth, that I do not know the answer to, but the folks that I work with, my staff and the GCO, will take a look at that. It's an excellent point, and we will we'll find out.
Okay, Kent.
Thank you, Presiding Bishop. On the question of liability, setting aside the pastoral question about that is embedded in that question as a legal matter, we can do what we can to protect ourselves from liability. That involves doing the mitigation processes, all the things that Dr. Coldren talked about, enforcing our policies, making sure that we do the right things to keep people safe. And there are other measures we can do in terms of protecting the legal liability, which of course is a separate issue from the pastoral ones.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Secretary?
Kurt Barnes.
Kurt?
Thank you. I'm confused and I have I do have a multiple part question. I think what I've heard is that, well, my confusion is, do the canons currently provide or permit virtual meetings and voting? And if they do not, what is the process and the rules of order? What is the process for ensuring or proposing a change in the canons and rules of order so we don't have this question recur 2 years from now? And who or what committee must present that as a resolution?
Why don't I assist the chancellors? One of you all want to start on that one?
Sure. Thank you, Presiding Bishop. Well, as I said before, reasonable minds can disagree right now about whether our governance permits the General Convention to do its work electronically. Clarifying that would be a good thing, and that would require some legislation. And so the Standing Commission on Structure, Governance, Constitution, and Canons could take it up. That would seem to be a logical place for that to go.
Mary, did we lose you?
No, I'm finished.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Well, I guess I'm still confused. It sounds like that will take another that could take considerable time, and we're going to be in the same boat 2 years from now without clarification.
If I might, one of the challenges, Kurt, is that would take considerable analysis of what the rules are now, and it is something about which there are big implications to say that we would gather not in person, and what that would mean for who we've chosen to be for our history. And so it's not like a corporation that simply looks to state law and says the state law permits us to amend our bylaws and take a virtual vote. That's not anything that was contemplated by our current documents, and therefore it's something that in our tradition would take some study, some discernment, and then all the appropriate drafting throughout the Constitution, the canons, and the rules of order. That's something that could be directed to be undertaken for the next 2 years, so that if it's the will of the body of the church to do that, maybe pieces can be put in place so that some of that could happen in 2024. But this would be potentially a major, some would say, theological discernment change, and needs thought. It's not a matter of doing a word search in the Constitution and canons and substituting one word for another and we're home free. So it needs to be looked at, it needs to be studied, and can be done hopefully relatively quickly so that the changes can be started if it's the will of the church to do that.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Secretary.
Byron Rushing.
Byron?
Yes, thank you. I would like to go back to the expected infection rate. And it's my understanding from the notes that we received of the meeting with Dr. Coldren that when we say the expected, when it is said that the expected infection rate is 10 to 12%, that we understand that that is the infection rate if we do everything. All the masking, all the other appropriate protocols. When do we say that to people? You see, I don't think we said that to the executive council. I've certainly never seen it in any meeting that I've been invited to, with long lists of all the things we're going to do. That the chances are that that 10 to 12% will be infected. And so my question to Dr. Coldren is, am I saying that accurately? And then if that is accurate, then when do we tell people that? And how do we tell people that? And to look at it the other way around, is it also then correct that I should assume I have a 1 in 10 chance of being infected if I follow all the rules?
So the 10 to 12% was the number that you all experienced, I understand, from your meeting in Puerto Rico. And from what I understand, protocols were not followed particularly well near the end of the meeting. So I think that the 10 to 12% is probably on the upper end of what I would anticipate if you follow the procedures correctly and individuals do the right thing and protect their neighbors. We've learned with COVID that it's almost impossible to model and to essentially give a good scientific guess as to how many people, what percentage would become infected. There's just so many variables involved, and you've discussed in this meeting a lot of them. But I think telling people that there could be up to a 10 to 12% infection rate is a reasonable thing to do, in that it allows people to calculate their own individual risk tolerance. It's possible you could have a higher infection rate. I certainly hope it would be much, much, much lower. But I think, you kind of have to throw a dart at a target on the wall and give a number so that individuals can determine whether or not they are willing to accept the risk. And I think 10%, particularly based on your own history, is reasonable, because you can justify it to people saying, this is what happened to us already, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. And I do want to remind members of council, we have 20 minutes left till our adjournment. So we'll take the next 5 hands that are raised, and then we'll move to the rest of the agenda. Mr. Secretary?
Scott Hayashi.
Scott?
Yes, thank you very much. I'm happy that we're going to have the general convention and do it in Baltimore. And you mentioned at the front end, shorter and smaller, and I understand we don't really know what that means at this point in time concretely to say how short we're talking, how much smaller we're talking, but the steps that we can take on the diocesan level. I mean, for instance, I can certainly, as the bishop, say to the deputation, here's the risk of going. You can voluntarily say you're not going to attend, because my understanding is we don't need the whole deputation to be present for the general convention. Because I am concerned about that 10% figure, because 5,000 people would be 500 cases. So what are the steps, the sooner we can get shorter and smaller out, and then we can start working in our own dioceses to talk to our deputation, simply say, it's not required that all of us go. And then they can make a determination as to who's going to go and who would stay home. And just practical points like that. Thank you.
Thank you. And yes, again, the design group will be helpful for that. And as soon as President Jennings said, as soon as we get decisions, design, planning arrangements, etc., council, then we can speak to the church. And then people can begin to make decisions. Mr. Secretary?
Dabney Smith.
Dabney.
Yes, thank you. Smith, Southwest Florida. I have a just I think a practical business question. If there is a large disruption, either due to illnesses or other forms of non-participation, and I know that our rules of order are not going to be technically flexible in terms of Zoom and all that. Is it possible to conduct the necessary components of business of convention and then reconvene one day somewhere later and ratify the actions?
One of the chancellors.
Can I say something?
President Jennings? Yeah.
Bishop Dabney, I think the design group will be working on how to front load a shorter convention with the critical things like budget, elections, and the most crucial resolutions, so that even, let's say it was a 4-day or a 5-day convention rather than an 8+ day convention, that we front load the most critical things so that if something were to happen and we needed to adjourn the 80th General Convention, leadership will have, the two houses will have already considered and held elections that are critical. The quorum in the House of Bishops is, I think, a simple majority, and the quorum in the House of Deputies is at least one clergy deputy or one lay deputy from half the diocese. I think that's correct, Chancellor Johnson, or close enough. So I don't think we're in danger of not having a quorum unless something happens in the middle of even a shorter convention with a massive outbreak. That's why we want to, the design group will be looking at how to front load. Does that answer your question?
It does, but my question is also in part, if one house does an action that the other house needs to affirm or consent to, and then that other house has a disruption, can it be ratified later?
I don't believe so, but I would leave that to the chancellors.
As the presiding bishop has indicated, someone is capturing all these questions and comments, and I think the design team will be very busy.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Dabney. Mr. Secretary?
Coach Luke Lawson.
Coach?
Morning, everybody. I want to thank the officers and executive council for their leadership over these past 7 years. But I also want to remind us that this is who we are. We are God's people. And sometimes I think that we make too many decisions with our mind and our intellect instead of listening to our heart. Let me talk about coaches and 2-minute drill. We know about halftime, getting close to halftime, we need to score. We know about the end of the game, we're behind, we need to score. But there's a 4-minute drill. And I think this is what the executive officers are talking about. We have time to put in place where we can successfully have a general convention and take care of the basic needs, the important needs of the church. We need to elect the president. We need to elect the executive council members. We need to pass a budget. And let me remind you, God provides for us. And I'm tired of hearing about money. We have money. Even if we have to go into reserves, and I know people in this don't like that. But what is the cost of a life? So if we need to spend money to make sure that everybody that goes is as safe as possible, then we should do it. And God will provide for us like he did for the people when he brought them out of Egypt and gave them water and manna. Thank you, Presiding Bishop K. Jennings. And President Jennings, I also have a pulse. And I think the reason, and the deputies of color, they had a very successful meeting, some of them came down with COVID too. The reason I believe is we get comfortable. We're so tired of COVID that when we see one another in person, we want to reach out, we want to hug. We cannot get comfortable when we go to a meeting. That's just leads to disaster. Thank you.
Thank you, Coach. Mr. Secretary?
George Wing.
George?
Yes, I have a question of Dr. Coldren. From what I've tried to find out, particularly Israeli studies on the length that booster shots, vaccinations are protective, is that they tail off fairly rapidly after a couple of months. And by the 5 or 6 months, there's much less protection. I tried to time it before the San Juan meeting by getting my second booster shot 2.5 weeks before the meeting. And so far I've been in good shape, although I had contact with at least 5, maybe 6 people that came down with the virus. Is there a recommendation that you can share or that can be shared with the people attending General Convention on timing booster shots and how long the antibody protection is likely to be at a level, desirable level? I think that's a critical question that needs to be shared to the people coming.
So when you talk about the protective effect of vaccines and boosters, you need to separate out the protective effect of getting an infection and the protection against severe disease. So it is unfortunately true that the Israeli study and a UK study and several others have shown that the protection against infection tails off after about 2 months, and by 6 months' time has significantly dropped. It's still about a 30% protection against infection, even at 6 months out. So the question of timing a booster shot is actually a very good one, and thank you for bringing it up. The problem is if you have somebody delaying getting their booster so that they are protected against infection during the convention, they run the risk of getting infected in the meantime, being unboosted, and then having a more severe illness than they would have had otherwise. Because the protection against severe infection does not tail off. Even at 6 months out, it is 75% plus reduced. So I would be very uncomfortable recommending people delay protecting themselves against severe infection to try to protect themselves against infection at the convention. If somebody leads a very socially distanced life, I live on a farm, for instance, where the risk of infection is low, it might be a reasonable strategy, but I can't recommend it across the board.
Okay, thank you. And our last hand, I believe, Mr. Secretary?
Yes, Steve Pankey.
Steve.
Thank you. I have 2 questions that I hope have quick answers. One is that the notes that we were provided through the extranet, many of those points have been discussed here on the public forum. Are they open for us to share? And then second, to Chancellor Johnson's point about the goal of General Convention as being in community, I think what I think we're being asked for here is to change our mindset about this general convention in Baltimore as being strictly a business meeting. This is not the communal gathering. This is strictly a business meeting. Am I reading that correctly in what I've heard here today? Thank you.
The answer to your second question is yes. Doctor, who would answer the first question? I'm not sure.
Probably President Jennings, Presiding Bishop.
President Jennings? We can't hear you, Gay.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Coldren, but I think you said it was all right for those to be shared. Is that correct?
Yes, I certainly have no objection.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Steve. All righty. And Dr. Coldren, thank you to you. Thank you very much from all of us to you.
And if I may, I don't know how to raise my hand on Zoom, but just one thing I want to point out, and it's almost a cautionary. In my experience, if you do things correctly, it will look like you overreacted. And people will say, well, you know, we came and we did all this stuff and there just weren't that many cases. So why was it a big deal to begin with? So a little bit of just experience I want to pass on to you all that you may well come into criticism if you do it right for having overreacted when in fact it was your reaction that made it look that way. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We move next to Executive Council's role and responsibilities, and we have 7 minutes left in the meeting. Mally? Do you see her?
Yep, I'm
Oh, there you are.
I'm unmuted now. Molly or whoever's running the Zoom, is it possible for me to share my screen? So, and while that's being worked out, my purpose in the next few minutes is to talk about, given everything that we've heard, what role and responsibility of Executive Council moving forward. And I have a little chart graph that we can look at. If you just give me a minute to get it up there as a slideshow. Hold on. All right. So first of all, one thing I'd like to say outside of my little presentation is I hope that the design team will take a really serious look at eating practices. Deputies I've heard from have said room service and takeout versus sitting around in restaurants. We could do everything perfectly in the convention center. And then I've heard one public health expert quoted as saying, the biggest spreader is the hotel bar. So I hope the design team will help us work that out. So you'll see on my little chart here, I think there are 4 areas where Executive Council may or may not have responsibility. We've talked a lot about the medical and the pastoral at the top of the triangle there about precaution and prevention. Another part of medical and pastoral is the on-site and local medical services. What happens? How will people get their prescriptions filled? How will they get food, water? Who will take someone to the hospital? All of that kind of thing. And so I hope that will be part of the design team's work, or whether there is a little subcommittee of some sort that looks at hiring medical health experts to oversee this, because I don't believe that Executive Council or the General Convention Office or the design team is medical expert enough to set up something that will provide services on site. Gay said there are a lot of volunteers from the House of Deputies. That would be great. Who will coordinate those, et cetera. Again, the General Convention Office is going to have its hands full trying to rejigger the General Convention to shorter, smaller, and that might be something that could be taken off of the General Convention Office or the planning and arrangements plate. And the third piece of medical and pastoral, people have talked about, I believe that we should have a written covenant that we sign along with our waiver of legal liability that says, I will follow these precautions as set out by the design team or the GCO or whoever's going to do it. And I sign my name here and I covenant with each other to do this. And I think that covenant should have a theological as opposed to a medical or practical base. As the presiding bishop said early on, this is a love your neighbor. This is a respect the dignity of every human being. This is, we are all one body, and when I hurt, everybody hurts. To make it a theological base, when you sign on to your virtual binder every day, the covenant comes up, or a cartoon or a picture or something that reminds us that we have signed this covenant and we will keep the covenant today. So again, that might be another little committee, maybe of executive council members, maybe of deputies and bishops, I don't know, but I hope there will be a committee that will work on that and try to make that happen. Other executive council functions are to keep an eye on governance, and it sounds like that's being taken care of. Who decides what's essential? Of course, favorite, my heart, is the financial part. And this is not going to be a money saver. You know, we are on the hook for, and we are on the hook for our deposits, for our hotel rooms. We might be able to, well, no, I'm not even going to go there. So the question that has come up is how to fund the changes that are coming, how to provide prevention supplies, et cetera. As Coach said, we have, and Holly said too, we have enough money that we can provide a safe and effective convention. The money that is already spent is already spent. It's already committed. It's in the budget. We just have to find what the extra expenses are and let go of the money that is spent, understanding that we are helping the city of Baltimore by leaving that money there, even though we might not get the full 8 days worth of what we hope for. But that is certainly something that Executive Council and Finance Committee could be ready, willing, and able to help with once those figures come to us. So along with advice and consent to the plan, we would help to fund the plan. And then the General Convention Office has talked to us before about the reputational implications of changing, shortening, et cetera, of the convention. And again, that reputation is something that the audit committee considers fiduciary responsibility to look out for. And that has to do with, you know, some people might say that by keeping the convention, we're serving people on the margins. Some people might say that we're threatening people on the margins by requiring them to come to Baltimore. We're not requiring anybody to come, but the back and forth of how to theologically underpin what we're doing and to understand that every decision that we make has some reflection on the reputation of the Episcopal Church, and that we are stewards of that reputation. So the more thoughtful we can be, the more theologically based we can be, the better off we are. So I just want to, the planning team, our little planning team, wanted to bring this around to what do we do as an executive council moving forward? And it's clear that we'll be asked for advice and consent. And these other areas are areas where we may be called into action, or we might volunteer to be called into action to support the work of the design team, the General Convention Office, the planning and arrangements, et cetera. That's my report or comment. And I will unshare now.
Thank you, Mally. Mally, thank you. And again, all of this, everything that we've talked about has been captured and will be given to design team, General Convention Office, et cetera, so that we'll have this and be able to work on it. As has been mentioned, the council will be called back into session once the design team has done its work, once planning and arrangements and the presiding officers have met and are ready to ask advice and consent on specific matters. And as soon as we're ready to go, we will get back with you in a timely manner. Are there any other matters, Mr. Secretary?
Presiding Bishop, that concludes the agenda.
May I have a motion that we adjourn with prayer? I see hand, Coach Malley second. All in favor, wave your hand. All opposed, so ordered. Mr. Chaplain, if the chaplain would close us out with prayer, we will adjourn.
Let's pray. Good and gracious God, we thank you for the people who have prepared our meeting today, who have stretched to consider possibilities, consider our responsibility to one another in supportive, loving ways. We thank you for the questions that have been raised, the commitment to further delve into such questions, and the work to come, and the commitment to follow this through to convention and our continued life with one another. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, everyone, for a good meeting. Thank you. God bless.